in some form of
Okay.
way, whether that is, actually going to go to YouTube or not. But yeah, Martin, I wanted to ask, like, why the move? You're in a new space. I think I actually saw you in a different space before this, but you're
Yeah.
in a new move or a new place. Why?
We've been looking for a very long time now. We've been renting for quite a while, and this was an opportunity that we found. I think you can also see it's much brighter than the old place.
Yes.
We're very happy about that. It's yeah, sunny, warm,
Hmm.
and enough space.
Awesome. Um, yeah, we are probably going to move towards the end of the year, which we're excited about. Mostly in with friends rather than just, yeah, we've been renting forever as well, but we're trying to rent with
Yeah,
or move in with other people. So we're pretty excited about that.
it's nice.
Yeah.
It's usually a lot of work still, but it's worth it. So fine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I think just moving places in general, we've also been living here my wife has lived here for 10 years. I've lived here for like
Oh,
5 years. And so we just have a lot of we just have a lot of our roots are nested in here. So anyways,
yeah, 10 years is a
um,
long time.
I know. Yeah. Especially for San Francisco and I don't know, people who've been switching jobs a lot. So it's been good that we've been able to stay here for so long. But anyways,
Mm.
we're not here to talk about the moves. We're here to talk about your posts. We're here to talk about your background and why you've been writing about Zephyr and everything else. So yeah, let's get started. Thank you everybody for joining. Um, I am Tyler Hoffman. I'm one of the co-founders of Memfault, and I'm also run the head of the field engineering team or the solutions engineering team at Memfault. We are joined today by Martin. Can you actually say your last name, Martin? I don't think I ever asked you.
Lampacher. That's
Lem
it doesn't sound very Italian, does it?
no, Lampacher, Martin, who is a freelance embedded engineer, and he wrote a wonderful series about Zephyr. I think it's like six, seven posts long, and then also wrote a really nice post on modern C development using containers. It's the one I go and reference when I need to look up how to actually do that with VS Code nowadays. But yeah, before we get into it, Martin, can you take a little bit of time to introduce yourself and update all the listeners on who you are?
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Martin. I'm gonna leave out the last name. It's gonna be a bit too difficult, I think. But believe it or not, I am Italian. I am based in Italy, though in the very north. I'm a freelance embedded engineer, so it's quite a broad topic, so to say. Yeah, so I'm not just firmware, but I'm also working on other things. I My background is mostly computer engineering. I studied computer engineering in Vienna, though back then I actually focused more on digital design, so it wasn't that much embedded focused. And only towards the end of my studies, I switched to firmware and to embedded and focused mostly on this gap between firmware and software. This was the
Mhm.
most interesting thing to me. So I'm not a hardcore electrical engineer, quite the opposite actually. But yeah, ever since I've been working mostly on firmware, mostly with MCUs, and actually mostly in safety critical embedded systems. So not something that Zephyr is known for right now, but hopefully will be. And yeah,
Have you always been a freelance engineer? Like, did you actually get started in that right at a university, or did you have a normal desk job for a company?
I did have a normal desk job for a company,
Yeah.
actually quite a while. I've been freelance and only for 6 years, but I think people had a bit of a difficult time with keeping me. I admit that. So I tend to get bored quite fast, but so freelancing gives me a bit more space to explore other things, and yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
Self-awareness is good. If you know they struggle to keep you, then at least you're ahead of the game. Um, yeah, so that's why freelance. And then how has it been for the last 6 years? I think a lot of people aspire to do it, but I know it's hard. How have you been successful in doing it? And it's only yourself, right? It's just you as your own, firm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like most freelancers, probably you get projects from contacts or from people you have been working with previously, and from people who know the people who know the people who you have been working with. But so far that was quite good. So on online I didn't find that much. So all of these portals, it was a bit difficult for me.
Mhm.
But I usually work on projects for a very long time, so I don't do short projects. I usually try to see things through when I can, so start to finish, hopefully, or at least to a point where I can pass this on to the company who is working with the things, but so that most stuff should be clear that I've been working on.
That's the dream. I think I talk to a lot of freelancer consultants who see something through to the prototype stage, and then they kind of get sad when they don't get to finish it and fix all the bugs,
Mm.
and actually see it into production. So it sounds like you're living the best of both worlds.
That I have,
So yeah,
that I appreciate a lot. Yeah.
very lucky. So yeah, so let's talk about the Zephyr post. So this is a serious series about Zephyr, where you've gone through much of the like magic that is Zephyr, device tree, kconfig, getting it set up. I think integrating into the VS Code. Your article beforehand was like how to develop, kind of how to develop efficiently and well on your system. Like what inspired all these posts, particularly the ones about Zephyr?
I think Zephyr itself has a bit of a steep learning curve. So if you're not coming from something that is Linux or embedded Linux or device drivers in Linux, then there's a lot of new things. And for me, it was the same. I haven't been working on embedded Linux, so device tree is a big thing
Mhm.
that took a while to get a hold on. And also kconfig, though that is a bit more straightforward. But the reason I was switching or I was looking into Zephyr is that in past projects, I've been working with different MCUs. So you know how it goes. You start a project, you look at the MCU, you look at what's
Yep.
there. There's a framework, there's an SDK. You start working with this, you get familiar with it. You know it and you know it well and you're happy with it. And yeah, at some point, most of these SDKs become deprecated or they change to something new and or if you switch MCU, you start from scratch and here we go again. Now it's an STM, it's no longer something else. And then it's Nordic. They had their own SDK in the beginning as well. And actually, the Nordic chips started it for me. So I was using them quite a lot. I really liked them. But
From the
then they made
Internet
the
5
switch to
SDK?
Zephyr.
Okay, got it. So you were
Yeah,
using them before they were on Zephyr. Yep.
yes. It wasn't, it was good, but it wasn't great. So I'm happy that they switched. But initially I thought, yeah, now again, like I had everything up and running. I was pretty happy with it. I was using FreeRTOS then with it and wrote everything myself though on top of their drivers. And now they switched to Zephyr and I don't know anything about it. So initially I said, okay, I'm taking a break now. I don't have the time for this now. But more and more I was reading about it every now and then. I started reading the documentation, which improved a great lot in the last few years.
Mhm.
And then I started to give it a go to say, okay, let's take a project that I already had, start moving it to Zephyr and see how it goes.
So you actually had a
So
project that was an existing one that you were porting it to Zephyr?
yes, yeah. It was a
Did
small project. It wasn't an actual product, to be
Okay.
fair,
Yep.
but it had everything before. I had a bootloader. I had the application. I had updates running. But sometimes something that you usually like, it's not just the functionality that is the hard part. It's everything around it. The functionality, you don't need an RTOS. You don't need Zephyr for it. Of course not. But then the projects start to grow. You need, I don't know, runtime reconfigurability. You need storage. You need diagnostics. You need over-the-air updates, and now you have connectivity. And I don't know, maybe you have a real project with hundreds or thousands of units, so you need a test framework that also works in production, like for production tests. You have product variants. Now you need to build different things, and yeah, or even completely different projects that build on top of this. So there's a huge pileup, and so for me, it wasn't really just about the RTOS. It's the whole thing
Yeah.
that really helps you out.
But no one thinks about these things, Martin. No one cares about testing and hardware configurability and runtime configuration and all these other things. They only care about the core functionality of the device. No, you're just on the other end. You've already been convinced, so that's good.
Yeah.
Were the posts written for yourself or for others, do you think?
It was no, that's not a question. I think it was for myself because I but like I try when I learn new things, like trying to explain them to someone else that's incredibly helpful. Like
Yeah.
you really learn these things then, because once you think about something that actually I don't know what's happening here, but maybe I need to dig into it to be able to actually explain it to someone. So it is pretty much just my experience with starting with Zephyr step by step, how I did this. And I think you can also see it a bit because it might not be as helpful for people who don't want to know how the things
Mhm.
work underneath. So that is something uh, maybe a few people appreciate, but I don't think everyone needs to know how the whole macros decompose from device tree. It's good enough to know how it works. You don't need to know this when you use Zephyr until you get the link error that your device is not there. And but
I hope
but
most
then you
people are
take
at
it
least
from there.
interested in peeling back the layers and seeing what's going wrong, because we're all engineers. I mean, I hope we're all engineers that are writing code. If we're not, there's maybe an identity crisis. Um,
And I like C macros, so I don't know. It's not for everyone, but I like
yeah,
the macrobatics that was presented with Zephyr. I really enjoyed that video also. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
I'm now realizing I guess the ecosystem of Zephyr is more or less what I think I've always been trying to build over and over again. At Pebble and at Fitbit, we've just tried to make everyone use one set of tools. They had one, I mean, basically, I think we were basically re-implementing West for the most part.
Yeah.
Like we were re-implementing a West using a tool called Invoke, Python based, but it allowed you to just run Invoke test, Invoke debug, Invoke build with a whole bunch of configuration and a lot of magic under the hood, but no one had to understand how it worked. We were all in the same tool base. We were all in the same environment. We didn't use containers, but it kind of felt like containers. We used Conda, which is another different environment manager. And it basically was Zephyr, but just completely homegrown and built over the course of 3 years, which took forever.
Yeah. And then you also need to maintain it. That's the thing.
Yes. Yeah. And it was my full-time job to
Mm.
maintain two different projects, and I think two other people were on my team, and then all the other firmware engineers were obviously contributing to it constantly, to the like essentially the West like tool, but also writing firmware as well. Of course, that was our actual job. But
Yeah.
yeah. So the other question I had was like, Zephyr is massive. It tries to it's one of the largest embedded projects I think I know of. It is a framework. I wouldn't even call it an RTOS. They probably should stop calling it Zephyr RTOS and start calling it just like, I don't know. I mean, Zephyr framework or something. You find that to be a positive. Like why, I guess. And you kind of alluded to it, but it is such a large learning curve, and sometimes people just need an RTOS. Like, should they still use Zephyr?
If you just need and that depends a bit on how, like, if you're a hobbyist and you just want to have some project running for yourself, I don't know, something for your garden, take whatever fits your needs. You can use whatever you want. But as soon as you start working on a real project, on something that might grow, on something that or if you have not just one embedded project, but you will have a new one,
Mm.
then it really starts making sense to looking into these more difficult things, because you will need it anyhow. Like, as we all have seen, you're just going to start building stuff yourself, and it's already there in Zephyr. And you can always decide not to use things. So if you say, okay, I just want the RTOS and I want West or something for my configuration management, and I want the test framework that they have,
Mhm.
which is really great. You don't need to set up anything yourself. You don't need to think about how to do things well. Start your projects and use the HAL or whatever you need or whatever functions you need. And yeah, you could even get around maybe not using Zephyr as an RTOS at all. Just use the whole framework that they
Mm.
give you. Though that is a bit of a stretch.
I was gonna say people probably don't recommend that. That's probably not
Nah,
necessary for the most part.
no, no.
If you were even starting up on a gardening project, would you use Zephyr at this point? Like, do you think it's quick? Like, do you think you're quick enough to even use Zephyr on something that small and constrained?
Yeah, depending on what sensors you have and what
Yeah.
peripherals you have, for sure. Because if there are no device drivers and there are device drivers in Zephyr for it, it works most of the time.
Hmm.
And if not, you can patch it up, I think, yourself as well, or tailor it to your needs. If it's not fitting to whatever you need to do and it's not usable upstream, whatever you're doing, you can at least take it as a starting point. So yeah, I would definitely start with it. And one thing that has been really difficult also in the past, or if you think about your own project, is low power, and that can be
Yep.
quite difficult quite fast. So yeah, of course, if you just want to start up a project and have it execute the whole time without going to sleep, then it's also not necessary. But if you need power management because it's running on a battery or it's running on solar power, then Zephyr also has everything there for you already. It's a bit complicated in the beginning, maybe, but once you have it there, it works, and it works really well. And that step from being, I don't know, either a main loop or just a task that is executing continuously to something that really needs to power down properly, that is a hard thing.
Yeah, I mean, you just keep listening. I'm testing different hardware. I mean, power management was a huge one. Diagnostics. I know it has tracing capabilities, logging capabilities, metric
Yeah.
capabilities. Memfault's built into Zephyr. Like, all this stuff can kind of just be come immediately out of the box without having to do any work. So it's very, very cool. What was the hardest part for you about learning Zephyr? I guess what was the hardest part, and since you were learning it as you were writing it, what was the hardest part to write about?
Device tree.
Really? Okay.
Definitely. It is because it is not like a very strict syntax, and you patch on top the semantics later with your bindings. Like when I listened to videos in the beginning, I couldn't really follow because I didn't know what a binding was. Like, what are you talking about? Now I can just see it there. But then you just have this kind of node structure without any meaning yet, and patching this together with the bindings, really understanding what's going on, what it means to have a compatible device driver, and to really understand what you can do with it and what it's not meant to do. That took me
Mhm.
a while. So
Got it.
big example is pin control. That is a bit of a issue there, but that is always going to remain, I think, vendor specific anyhow, because everybody does it differently. But they
Yeah.
covered it really well in device tree.
Awesome. And is device tree, do you think, have you started using any of the AI tools to at least generate code? Whether that's just like in the UI or actually on a like in a VS Coder environment or anything like that?
I did, though I find that in embedded it's still lacking. Maybe in
Yep.
Zephyr
Agreed.
itself, it might have more to run with because there is much more online that you can find.
Yep.
But I didn't find the need for device tree, and if it makes a mistake, then it's a bit hard to debug. And that, like a device tree, I'd rather want to understand what's happening there. But as soon as you go to the APIs that you need to use, it can do things like you can just tell it, hey, I need to get this out of my device tree in code, and I need to initialize it accordingly, and I need to use it. Like, just give me an example of what to do, and then you take it from there. That is much faster than just doing it by hand.
Got it. So yeah, I guess for the low level, I mean, device tree is basically about drivers and getting the hardware to work. So yeah, the lower level stuff probably not quite good, but as soon as you get to the API level and above, it should
Yeah.
be pretty easy. Yeah, the my coworker, I challenged my colleague to get acquainted with an AI tool. He'd kind of been hesitant, I guess, probably like a lot of firmware engineers, honestly. They're like, I don't need this. I challenged him to write some sort of application using Cursor, the AI tool. And he actually came
Wow.
back like a couple of days later and wrote a Gopher client in C on Zephyr using the CLI with like a whole GUI. And he was over the moon about it, I would say, and then also wrote about it on Interrupt, and so honestly, it was pretty cool. Anyways, getting beyond that, what are you working on now? So yeah, you were saying you're now in the safety critical space. You can't really use Zephyr there yet.
Not yet, no. I'm working on it's off-highway industry. It's automotive grade ECUs. So
Okay.
they're also using, again, the targets that Zephyr can't support because everything is buried under NDAs. So there is not much to work with in the beginning. And I've been following Zephyr for a long time, like their certification progress, and it is slow. Like everything in safety critical systems, it is a very, very slow process. It's very diligent. You need to do a lot of things, and that has only become worse in the last 10 years. So if you think about what you needed to do 10 years ago, it's not even half. So yeah, but
Yet you're
I
still in the
really,
industry, so
I'm still there. That's maybe a bit where, like, I like the rigorous part about it. I like that it's
Yep.
not just about getting something done, but it needs to work and needs to work well. And there is a reason for all of this paperwork. Or at least I hope there is still. But yeah, it's gonna take a while still. And for now, obviously, the projects I'm working on, most of the stuff is written from scratch, like the entire
Still.
hall, the startup code. You can't use third party. If I would want to use memfault, I couldn't execute it in a safety critical application. I would need to wrap the whole thing, because there is this kind of idea that everything that has not been developed in a safety critical context, you can't trust it, even though it's well tested. It needs to go through the whole process. And
Yeah.
I think Zephyr, if they ever get there, it might be a small set of things that are gonna be safety certifiable. It will be the OS, probably the kernel, but then I'm interested to see how far they go with the device drivers and stuff. But it's gonna be tough. But I'm following it along, and I'm really keen to see it.
Yeah. If you had a best guess on when you can use Zephyr in safety critical, what year would you put it in?
That's a tough one. I mean, when did I first hear about that they want to do the certification? That was a couple of years ago. So it will be a couple of years still. I
Yeah.
don't want to say a number
So
because it
say
also
if you say a number,
depends.
I'll come back to you. I'll message you later and ask you how that went.
It
Uh,
also depends a lot how many people are working on it now, because it's getting a lot of traction. I think also with NXP chiming in.
yes,
I
they're
think they're
they're
doing
they're
a
now a
lot.
partner. Yep.
Yeah. So maybe it's not that far off as I think.
Yeah. I
But
mean, I think
also
there's a lot
one
of
thing that
movement.
yeah, one thing that I'm curious about is how they deal with things like device tree and kconfig, because also it's not just about what is running on your firmware, but also what generates your firmware that needs to be looked into in these safety processes. So it's a tough
I
one.
mean, yeah. Do you have to certify the output or just the input? I don't know. Probably both.
Depends if the tool is certified, then I think you're fine with the input. If the tool is not
Exactly.
certified, then you're gonna have to review your DTS files or even
Yeah.
the code. Yeah, the macros.
Got it. I'm going to save for a couple more minutes. One more question. So you wrote a wonderful post about the modern embedded development environment using containers and other sort of modern tools. What are like the top two things you'd recommend anyone definitely investigate? What would you never live without? I guess even in your safety critical space, you're using some of those best practices, I would still assume.
I mean, have a testing tool ready that you can run while you're developing. Don't just test on target. Don't just test manually, but have a test suite. Grow with it. And I'm not saying you need to do TDD or something similar. You can, but it's not necessary. But don't, if you have a complex unit or subsystem, just use a test tool for it. It also will increase the quality of your code. It will make it more testable in the end, so you wouldn't have to refactor it again once you start testing. And if you can, containerize whatever the environment is so that other people can chime in. I don't say use Docker, but use whatever fits your needs. So, because if you lose a lot of time just to set up the whole tool chain, just to get the tools running, just to have everything there, and especially if you're working on multiple projects where there might even be conflicts, it saves a lot of time. And for instance, my machine, my personal computer, I don't want to trash it with all of the tool chains that are out there. I don't want to install everything. I'm using Docker for now because yeah, I'm not a big company. I'm not part of the licensing thing yet. But I also understand if people say, hey, there is also things like Nix that could work perfectly for you. But just take these two things. Start with testing, have a test framework, and have something that installs your tools or keeps your tools managed.
Great tips for everybody. Okay, that's about all we have time for. So thank you for joining everybody who joined via YouTube Live. Big thank you to you, Martin. Thank you for joining us, for walking us through your series on Zephyr, and for giving us some background and stories and good insights. If you haven't read his post, brew yourself like 4 coffees and over a whole week, and read through them. Take some time to adjust them. Do you actually give examples, like example code that they can work on, or is it mostly like teaching on the Zephyr
There,
post?
there are like runnable examples on GitHub.
Okay,
There's several accompanying GitHub repositories, so
awesome,
everything should even run on GitHub Actions. So it should still be
awesome.
buildable, whatever is there.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, and if anyone is interested, and if Martin, if you're interested continuously, come write for Interrupt. Like we love new contributors. We'll help you along with the process, and we'll post links to all of Martin's posts in the chat, and we will see you next time. So thank you for joining. Oh, final plug I have to say, join the Interrupt Slack. We have a Slack channel where a lot of us hang out. We all ask questions, and you can stay up to date on anything that's going on. Martin, any final thoughts, final recommendations?
Thank you for having me, first of all.
Of course.
And the Interrupt blog is really, really a great resource. There is a lot of stuff on there. I learned a lot myself. I still check out also the monthly readings.
Hmm.
I don't have to dig it in myself, but there's everything presented for you. I like it a lot.
The monthly roundups are kind of a gold mine, but
Yes.
also the posts from 2020 and 2021, they still provide me with answers that I have forgotten, and I still send them to so many people today. So awesome. Thanks again, Martin, and thanks again, everybody, for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.